The blast doors were 3 seconds from sealing when Marcus Reyes did something no Valkyrian had ever seen a bodyguard do. He laughed. Not the panicked, adrenaline-soaked laugh of a man about to die. A real one. The kind that made Princess Zathara's antennae flatten in confusion. Because in 11 years of Valkyrian military history, nothing had ever found this funny. "You're going to want to step behind me," Marcus said, cracking his knuckles. "Behind you?" Zathara's voice dripped with the same contempt she'd used on him since day one. "You're a primitive savage from a planet that only discovered space travel for centuries ago. I've survived 3 assassination attempts without your help." "Sure," Marcus rolled his shoulders. "But you've never survived one with the ship's reactor core exposed and 40 boarding drones inbound. Today's a first for both of us." 6 months earlier, when the Valkyrian Ascendancy had graciously accepted Earth's offer to provide a personal bodyguard for the Crown Princess, nobody expected them to send someone like Marcus Reyes. He wasn't tall by Valkyrian standards. He wasn't fast by their standards either. His species didn't have retractable claws, echolocation, or the ability to survive vacuum exposure for 90 seconds like Zathara's own guards could. What he had was a rifle he called unnecessary, a knife he called backup, and a habit of standing perfectly still in the corner of every room like furniture nobody had bothered to catalog. "This is what Earth sends?" Zathara had said, the first day, circling him like he was a specimen. "A soft, slow, hairless thing with no natural weapons?" "Ma'am," Marcus had replied, "I'd rather you underestimate me than the other way around." She'd scoffed, ordered him reassigned to the outer perimeter, the most boring, least prestigious post on her personal ship, the Zathara Ascendant. Punishment, she thought. Marcus had simply said, "Copy that," and gone to learn every access corridor, ventilation shaft, and blind spot on the ship by heart. For 6 months, she barely spoke to him except to mock him. The primitive savage. The meat shield. Once, in front of her entire court, she'd asked him to demonstrate whatever passes for combat training on Earth, expecting comedy. He'd declined, politely, which somehow made it worse for her because refusal wasn't something her guards did. The KRYLL syndicate hit the Zathara Ascendant during the one transit window her own security detail considered statistically safest. Deep space, no allies within 6 hours, running dark to avoid pirate patrols. They'd been tracked anyway. 3 warships dropped out of slipspace in a pincer formation that Zathara's tactical officer would later call textbook perfect. Which was the problem. The KRYLL weren't raiders. They were professionals, and someone had sold them the Ascendant's patrol schedule. The first strike took out shield generators 2 and 4. The second breached the outer hull on Deck 7, right where Zathara's quarters were. Marcus was already moving before the alarms finished their first cycle. "Princess, with me. Now." No mockery left in his voice, and none in hers either. Just 11 Valkyrian royal guards, trained from birth for exactly this, freezing for half a second too long, processing an attack pattern they'd never drilled for. Marcus hadn't frozen. He'd been waiting for this exact scenario in his head for 6 months, walking the ship, mapping every corridor, memorizing every choke point precisely because nobody was paying attention to him. "The boarding pods will hit the cargo bay first, wide entry point, low resistance," he said, half-dragging her through a service corridor most of her own guards didn't know existed. "Then engineering, because that's where they cut life support to force a surrender. Then the bridge." "How do you know that?" "Because it's what I do." She'd expected him to hide her somewhere and stand guard at a door, the way her Valkyrian guards were trained to. Static defense. A wall between danger and the princess. Instead, he led her toward the fighting. "This is insane," she hissed as he dropped to one knee at a T-junction, sighting down the rifle he'd called unnecessary 100 times before. "This is math," he said. 40 boarders divided across 3 access points. Your 11 guards are already engaged at the bridge and cargo bay. Nobody's covering engineering. Nobody's covering us. That means we're the only variable the KRYLL didn't account for. The first 3 drones came around the corner in a tight cluster, expecting an empty corridor. Marcus put 2 rounds through the lead unit's optical sensor before Zathara even registered movement, then used its collapsing chassis as cover while the second round found the joint seam on Drone 2. The third he took down with the knife he'd called backup, driven straight into a servo housing at a range so close she felt the spark on her face. It was over in 4 seconds. She'd seen her own elite guards take longer against a single training dummy. "You," she started. "Move." He was already pulling her forward again, toward engineering, toward the exposed reactor core the KRYLL needed intact to loot the ship's antimatter stores. "You've done this before," Zathara said, ducking behind a support strut as Marcus reloaded with hands that weren't shaking at all. 12 years in the Marine Raiders before I ever heard the word Valkyrian. He peered around the strut, calculating angles. Boarding actions. Hostage extraction. Close quarters combat in exactly this kind of environment. Tight corridors, low visibility, hostiles who think they've already won. Your people call this primitive. My people call this Tuesday. He caught her expression and almost smiled. You wanted claws and echolocation. What you got was someone who spent his whole life training for the 10 seconds you're living through right now. The blast doors ahead sealed automatically, standard Valkyrian emergency protocol, meant to protect the reactor core by locking it down. Which also meant it had just locked out the 12 KRYLL boarders converging on their position from the other direction, with Marcus and Zathara on the wrong side. That was the moment Marcus laughed. "Step behind me," he said again, and this time she did. He didn't wait for them to breach. He met them at the door the instant the KRYLL cutting charge blew it inward, using the smoke and confusion as cover the way he'd used every corridor on this ship for 6 months. Not as a stranger anymore, but as a man defending home ground. Zathara watched a Valkyrian myth get rewritten in real time. The soft, slow, hairless thing moved like something with no wasted motion at all, taking cover, taking angles, taking down boarders twice as mass one after another, not with strength but with a precision that made strength irrelevant. When the last KRYLL dropped and the corridor went silent, Marcus was breathing hard, bleeding from a shoulder wound he hadn't mentioned, and very much alive. So was she. "The fleet," she said finally. "My personal fleet is inbound. 14 minutes. Then we hold for 14 minutes. He checked his rifle's charge. Together this time, not behind a wall, beside one. For the first time in 6 months, Princess Zathara didn't have a single word of contempt left to give him. When her personal fleet finally arrived and the KRYLL warships broke off, Zathara stood on the bridge of the Valkyria Ascendant, surveying the wreckage of an attack that should have ended her reign. Her tactical officer approached, awed. "Your Highness, the human, how did one bodyguard hold engineering against a full boarding squad?" Zathara looked down the corridor to where Marcus Reyes was already back at his post in the corner, quiet, unassuming, watching the room like nothing had happened at all. "He's not a bodyguard," she said softly. "He never was. We just never bothered to ask what a soldier looks like on a planet that's had to fight for everything." She walked over, and for the first time inclined her head to him, the Valkyrian gesture reserved for equals. "Primitive savage," she said almost fondly. "Ma'am," Marcus replied, and this time they both laughed.